Okay, welcome back. This is our session where we're going to talk about teaching culture and cultural norms. Um, I think as many of you guys know, this isn't something that we've been able to spend a whole lot of time on before at IDDS, and yet it's continual feedback that it's something we do need to spend more time on. It affects a lot of what we do at IDDS, how we perceive, how we work in the design cycle. And so what I hope to do in this session is kind of give you a brief presentation about culture. This is one that you can steal. Please steal these slides and these presentations and these activity ideas. Use them at your IDDS. Fold some of the concepts in the best way you can into your curriculum. And I think you'll really see an exponential increase in the experience that participants have both locally and internationally. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Cool. So we'll start about kind of going over what is culture, and then share some activities from that we've used in the past, and then some resources that we have available. Can everyone see my screen? Oops. Not yet.
I saw it, but then it went away.
Let's try it again. Cool. Can everyone see it now?
Yes. Yes.
With the bone. Okay. So in talking about teaching culture and cultural norms, like I said, it's something that we really haven't done before at IDDS in a very substantial way. I think we kind of talk about music, language, food, but rarely do we take time to really talk about some of the deeper things. And so we want to think about some feedback that we had in some of our last evaluations were that, the topic is important, but the execution could be improved. So hopefully this will help you as you're thinking about that. And I think for those of you who had watched the other series or who were on this before, I think you remember at the very beginning when we were talking about IDDS culture, that culture is a lens through which we see things. So it's really hard to define. It's very intangible. And I think you guys know this. One definition that I really like that I included in the notes section here from some intercultural specialists, they're pretty popular, is I love their definition. They say culture consists of concepts, values, and assumptions about life that guide behavior and are widely shared by people. These are transmitted generation to generation, rarely with explicit instructions by parents and other respected elders. I also might add, and by social media in our modern day context. So these are just ideas that are being passed on, not necessarily intentionally, but very passively, both within our families, within our nation, and within the spheres of influence that we have. There's also, for those of you who are familiar or have a background in cultural studies, you know that there's a really popular scholar called Gert Hofstede, who is an intercultural specialist and has a whole center based on this, but he was pretty popular years ago for coming out with what's called the 5 dimensions of culture. And these dimensions help break down our kind of 5 key components that he breaks down on how do we view culture, what are important things to think about as we think of cultural differences, because there are differences that exist, and just being aware of those differences is perhaps the most important point. So his 5 points that he breaks down are power index, which is kind of the hierarchies or ways that we think about power both in the workplace and personally. Masculinity and femininity, those things that we see masculine versus feminine. An uncertainty avoidance. This also includes indirect communication and direct communication, which we at IDDS talk about in our working styles worksheet a bit. Long-term versus short-term normative orientation. Basically, how do we view ourselves in the grander scheme of things? So being more short-term focused or more broad history and tradition focused. And then last, indulgence versus restraint, and what we're promoted to do. I'm not going to go over those today. I encourage you, if you're interested in more, I've included the link here that you can go to for more information. But all that to say, these are some pretty deep things that we're talking about. I think a lot of you have probably seen this before. Has anyone seen this before? Deborah, maybe you have? Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure, I'm pretty sure Janet, Melissa, you guys have seen this before. Um, this is a pretty common illustration that you see out there, and if not taught well, can just be passed over. But the main point of this that we want to be describing, this is the cultural iceberg, is that when it comes to culture, there's about 10% of culture is observable, and the other 90% is not observable. So when you think about that, that breaks down to the behaviors and practices and customs that are observable, and we're pretty good at talking about that at IDDS, right? Like we talk about food, language, geographics, maybe a bit about politics, dress, dancing. We celebrate those things, and those things should be talked about. But that's only 10% of what else is going on behind the scenes. Then when we start getting into the non-observable, we start thinking about what are the norms and perceptions? What are the assumptions that we come with? What are our values? And ultimately, at the deepest point, what are some of our fears? What are our beliefs? And these are all things that affect what's observable. And I think we know this intrinsically. All of us who are coming to IDDS, most of us have a deep understanding of this, which is something that usually attracts people to IDDS. But it's not something that we really take a whole lot of time in the curriculum to talk about. And so I'd love for us to be able to share this and talk about it more at a deeper level. What that kind of looks like in terms of the specifics, like I mentioned on the top, there's the foods, crafts, languages. We usually have a session, and you should have a session your first day to talk about that. If for nothing else, just so people know, what are the languages that you're talking about? What food am I going to be eating? What types of ethnicities are around the area? What's the political structure? Where are the music and the games? Music and games should just kind of flow throughout. We want people to be enjoying and celebrating that. But these deeper questions, I think those of you who have been to IDDS before know that these deeper questions begin to percolate as IDDS goes on. Why do men treat women this way? Why does so-and-so keep showing up late? Why are they not on time? What are the underlying systemic structures? What are some of our mental models? And how do we understand ourselves versus the group, and which do we value more? And these kind of get teased out as we're doing community visits, as we're in our group team meetings, and they're things to be celebrated, but I think if they're not acknowledged, they can quickly cause confrontation and conflict. Again, conflict is not bad. It can produce good things, but being aware of this and allowing this to be learning opportunities that are baked into the experience are really important. And then ultimately, understanding the values and beliefs. That doesn't mean that we have to necessarily agree with people or adopt those values and beliefs for ourselves, but it's really important that we take time to just think, what are the values and the beliefs of Boa Vista do Acará? What are the values and beliefs of people living in Kampala? What are the values and beliefs of people living throughout in different communities in Zambia? And again, different people think different things, but what are some of the historical things that have shaped that? Why do people believe that way? And also, we have a fusion of cultures, so even within our team, we might have 3 or 4 different cultures represented. So what are some of those values and beliefs? Taking time to think through that. So a simpler way to kind of think about it that a lot of scholars have started coming out with is, when you think about the observable, a lot of what we're talking about is, there's the what that we can see, and then there's the deeper how and the why. Why is that? One activity that I love to run, I think maybe I've told Deborah about this before, but this is one of my favorite activities I love to do with people. I really encourage you to steal this activity and do it when you're talking about culture. At a much deeper level, more of the non-observable parts of culture, is start participants off with this. And I want us to give a moment for us to actually do this activity too. So I want all of you who can, Janet, I know you're at work right now, so if you want to do this, you can, or you can just listen in. But Melissa, Deborah, and myself, we're going to take a few minutes, and we're going to do this together. So this is called a social identity mapping activity. If you have a piece of paper, I want you to draw 3 circles that look like this, the inside being the core, the middle being the chosen, and the outer being the given. So I want you to draw these on your sheet of paper. I'm writing it even on mine. And in the given space, I want you to write down the things about you that are given. So I'll let you interpret that as you will. That could be anything that's been given to you. These are things that you were born with. Okay? In the second circle, in the chosen circle, I want you to write down the things about you that you chose. Things about you that you chose. I'll let you interpret that as you will. And then last, I want you to come to the core, and I want you to write down 3 to 5 core beliefs or values. Just three to 5 values that are very important for you. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. Any questions? Does that make sense?
Can you repeat core?
Yeah, the core is 3 to 5 values or beliefs that are most important to you. Does that make sense? I'm going to give us just a few minutes to fill it out real quick. Okay. Do you guys need more time?
No, I'm probably. Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay. So obviously, if you have more time, it's good always to give people a little bit more time for this. This is a deep thought activity. If anybody feels comfortable to share a bit about what's on your map, you're more than welcome to. If not, I'm happy to share mine. So if anybody wants to share theirs, feel free.
I don't mind sharing mine, I guess.
Great.
So in my given category, I put, brown hair, Italian heritage, and I guess, I don't know, being an only child would be part of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah. I've chosen to love animals. I don't know. I might have been born with that too. I'm not sure. To live in Boston, to teach, and then at my core, I believe in empathy, compassion, justice, and equality.
That's good. Carolina or Deborah, do either one of you want to share anything?
So for given, I was really confused. So so I thought about what I have, but anyway, so given it was not clear. But the chosen, I thought about the working a social path. or atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Working, yeah, I decided to not be in a corporative, like working with companies, big companies, as I was.
Mm-hmm.
The core was about listening,
Mm-hmm.
keep things simple, co-create things, and in the word empower, I'm using more if the person wants to be empowered. Because usually people are talking too much about empowering,
Mm-hmm.
but they forget that the people should want to. So it's kind of, I don't know if empower, it means that the person already wants. So I
Yeah,
don't know if this means the core thing, but I'm careful about the meaning of empowering.
I agree. Honestly, I kind of cringe at the word empower,
Mm.
um, because it assumes somebody doesn't already have power. But I understand that there is a lack of English vocabulary word for it. Sometimes I like to say encourage instead. But there is some sort of nugget there, right? That's like something about connecting with another person, and encouraging them, to be able to be an equal voice with everyone. That's good. Thanks for sharing that, guys. I really appreciate that. This is a very sensitive activity, so when you run it with participants, encourage, kind of like I did, if people want to share, they can, if they feel comfortable. If they don't feel comfortable, we respect that. I think everyone should do the activity, but they don't have to share out, because it can be kind of personal sometimes. However, if you get them to pair together and share together, and then if people want to share out, they can. That's also a nice way that's, a little bit more friendly, so that you don't have to share with the whole big group. But I think you brought up a good point, Deborah. I probably didn't clarify given enough. A good way to clarify given better would be, to say anything that you're born with or that you had no control over. It wasn't your decision. So a lot of that are things that you're born with. So, Melissa, kind of like you said, I also had in my given category, I was born female. I didn't have a choice over that. I was born white. I didn't have a choice over that. I
Right.
had blue eyes. I had, divorced parents, born in Japan. I have sisters and stepbrothers. Those were all things that I was just born into, the context that I was born into. Um, and then there were things that I chose, for myself. So I chose where to go to school. I choose what to eat every day. I choose to, walk to work instead of, taking a car. And then there's kind of my core values, which are truth, creativity, grace, and love. And it's interesting because what you'll see is similar to the iceberg, right? This given core, sometimes people say that this is the what, that we were talking about, the observable things. So what we look like, who our family is, where we live. And then the chosen is also somewhat observable, but it's getting a little bit deeper. It's getting into the how, so the things that we chose to do. And then there's that deep section that's at the very bottom of the iceberg that hardly anyone can see. This is stuff that they would have to ask us, or just assume about us, right, is our core values. And the interesting thing that scientists say is your brain is actually shaped this exact same way. So if you did a cross section of your brain, the deepest part, the most inside part, is your core, like where your core values are and where they're being developed. And so, as you know, when you connect with somebody, you kind of feel something neurologically connecting there, and that's what it is. It's your brain is firing with theirs. And also, what they say is that, it's interesting, right, that, Deborah, Melissa, and myself, all three of us, we have very different given and chosen, but our core, though we chose different words, is very similar in terms of what we value and what we believe in. And that's because organizationally we're drawn to those people who share our core values, right? They also say you should be working for organizations that share your core values. That's where you're going to find most fulfillment. So it's important. I think what you'll end up finding is as you run this activity, a lot of people have similar core values, but there will be some differences, and that's affected by where we've been, the life experiences we've had. So this is a good activity to help understand, at a personal level, But again, the main reason why we run this activity, the main reason why we talk about culture in general is the goal is understanding. We want our design, we hint at this with empathy, but we want our designs to reflect understanding and a mutual understanding of both of each other. We also don't want culture to turn into something where it's just these raw stereotypes, right? We don't want to clump people and say, oh, because they're from here, they're like this, or because they do this, they're like that. But we do want to understand that that is a background different people are coming from. And we want to understand that, I put some notes down in here, that as you're teaching this, we want to understand that culture is just one of a number of influences, right? So, you know, you may be, like Deborah may be Brazilian, and there are things that are Brazilian about her, but she also has things that are just Deborah. I have some things that are just shared. They're not American. They're not representative of our nationality or where we came from. Those are things that we chose for ourselves. So another thing that I like to do is, let me move this up here, is to talk about oops, this one. Is to talk about how there are universal cultural and personal values and things that we think about. And it's very easy, I think, when we come into a community to just assume, oh, that's the way the community does it, when it may just be the way a person does this. And I think we know it, but to take time and think through it. So I'll go through this quickly, but I'd encourage that if you have more time during your session to spend more time. With this activity, what I like to do, I call it the Universal Cultural Personal Activity. What I like to do is have all participants stand up. So if we were in the same room, I'd have you all stand up. I'd label one corner of the room universal, another corner cultural, another corner personal. And I'd say, okay, I want you to go to the corner that you think this statement describes. So I would give you an example scenario or a statement, and you would go stand in one of those rooms. So since we can't stand, I'll let you just shout out what you think. So for example, I would say something like, liking spicy food, is that a universal norm, a cultural norm, or a personal norm?
I would say cultural.
Yeah, cultural, but it could also be personal.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, you're right. It could be cultural, it could be personal, it could be both. And a lot of these you'll bump into, and you see that they have that fuzzy line. If you have time, you can tease out for participants why they think this. But it's good. The main point is you want to start showing people that it's a lot of interwoven things that are hard to break up. Respecting older people. Let's throw that out there. What do you guys think?
I would say the same. I don't know. Cool. I don't know. Personal.
Yeah, I would say cultural.
Yeah. So here's another case, right? There's things that respecting older people is something I would love to see as a universal norm, and maybe it's not. But maybe I might say it's universal because I'd like it to be universal. But for some places it's cultural, and for some places it's personal. And some places it's a little bit of both. So you'll see that there's fluidity throughout here. But it's good to be thinking of like what those examples might be in the context of your summit. So for example, like at IDDS Amazon, I might throw out an example like valuing the earth. Is that a universal, cultural, or personal? And then just letting people, you know, break up and see what they think. And again, there's no right or wrong answers to these. It's just to help us begin to think these are very fuzzy things, and so as we perceive things in the community, as we're doing Ask, Observe, Try, and gathering information, that the information that we're gathering comes with these backgrounds and these embedded assumptions. So the behavior, ultimately the behaviors that we see, if we think about our iceberg, right, we're seeing 10% The behavior that we see makes more sense when we understand the value or belief behind it. So when we understand the bottom of that iceberg. And so I love this picture in the background of a woman kissing someone, right? Like we see that behavior, and perhaps as an American, or perhaps as somebody, not even just as an American, perhaps as somebody who comes from a more conservative culture, I might say, oh, they're kissing because they love each other, or I could make certain assumptions about that. Why are they kissing? Versus if I came from a culture where we kiss and greet each other all the time because our value is connection, and our value is, that's just the way that we greet people, or we believe that physical touch is a way of communicating affection and just greeting. So there are different values and beliefs that will come behind each behavior that you see. So another activity that I like to run is an assumptions activity. Just to, get us aware of what are our assumptions that we come to the table with based on our experiences, based on our, if you want to go back to it, based on our social identity map, how would we view other people's identity maps? So thinking about the assumptions. So I want everyone to just kind of close their eyes and listen to this scenario for a moment. And I wanted you to think about this scenario and what assumptions are behind it. So I'm going to read you a statement that describes a classroom in a developing country as seen by an American observer. And this person writes, Teachers' frequent use of corporal punishment discourages students from actively participating in the classroom. Students are expected to sit rightly in their seats and speak only when spoken to. Conditioned this way, it's not surprising that they don't feel free to speak out in classrooms. Their shyness, however, should not be mistaken for lack of interest. You guys want me to read that again?
No, I think I have it.
It kind of paints you a scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the assumptions that you think are embedded in just these few sentences?
I think definitely when assuming that, I guess that the students are shy might be an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely, coming from, so a culture, the American culture is sort of, obviously we, value individualism and having our own opinions, and, I don't know if I'm even saying that right.
Yep.
But, that sort of, speaking out kind of culture that we have here, where, so he's assuming that should be the same, or that should be the evidence there that students are learning.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily the case.
Yep. So like the assumptions that speaking out is a good thing,
right?
Or shyness is a bad thing. Those are assumptions that are coming to the table. That's good. Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add? Any assumptions that you noticed?
I had an assumption that was that the teacher might suffer a lot because he has all the time to put some restriction and to ask the students to behave in a way that he wants to have the control.
Yeah. Yep.
It seems that someone that is suffering. I don't know. Yeah. And also the students are also suffering.
Yep. Yeah, that there's like the intrinsic assumption that there is suffering happening on someone's party here.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher is not having a good time, or the students aren't having a good time, and that this isn't good. When perhaps it's a culture where teachers are enjoying it and students enjoy learning that way, and we don't know until we really talk and begin to question our assumptions. Carolina, I think you're on the line. I don't know if you can hear us, but if you want to add anything, you're welcome to. You're on mute. Okay, no problem. If you want to add something, feel free to pop in. So yeah, you see that there are some assumptions. You could have also, if you wanted to, you might even also hear some other assumptions, such as student participation in class is good, corporal punishment is bad, sitting rigidly is bad. And so these are neither right nor wrong, but it's to begin to tease out what are some of those assumptions. So I like to run this activity, have people do just as we did, give participants a foretaste of, you know, let's be aware of our assumptions and why do we think like that. So it doesn't mean necessarily adopting these ways or agreeing with them. It just means understanding them and understanding the assumptions behind them. So then we talk about, okay, IDDS is so, so short. We don't really have a whole lot of time. So practically, you might only have 2 hours to spend on culture. So I would recommend, first 45 minutes or hour session on your first day going over those 10% things that we talked about: food, culture, money, politics, political background and history, like very simple, like fun, informational things that people should be aware of. But then to start talking about the other 90%, these are the kind of topics to be aware of, and that you and your curricular team, you and your organizing team in general, actually should think about, of these topics, what do we foresee are probably going to be the most important for our participants to be aware of? If you're, I list some examples here, but it's going to depend per summit. So gender is usually a big one that I would encourage all summits to do. But if you're having a very regional or local summit, it might not be as relevant. I would argue actually that gender is relevant for all of them in different ways. But maybe things like communication styles. I know in cook stoves you have a lot of regional homogeneity. There's still going to be personal differences, but there'll be a greater understanding because they're coming from similar cultures. It's not to say there won't be disagreement, there surely will, but you might not need to prioritize these as much. If I'm working with the East African Summit, a lot of us understand relationships are more valuable than time in our culture. We don't have to spend time talking about that. Versus if I'm at a more international summit, I might need to actually spend a few moments to talk about the importance of time versus relationships and how different cultures view them, because it's going to affect how people see it. Same thing with some of these other things on here. And so talk with your team, think about what might be most important to spend more time on. I will note that on gender, I would like to see everyone spend some time on gender, and here's why. Because we've had at several different summits, almost every summit, there is an issue of gender that comes out either explicitly or implicitly. We've had cases of some people talking about sexual harassment and feeling uncomfortable to mention it until after a summit, which is unfortunate. And I think the embedded assumption that I've always had is that we're coming to IDDS with particular values, all with the same values. And the truth is some people aren't. Some people don't come from that background. And especially when it comes to perceptions of men and women, this is something across the board that is worthy to be talked about and obviously plays a big role in each of the projects that we're doing, right? And I think all of you know the reasons why, so I won't tease out too much there. But I will say it's worthy to have a discussion, and so these are kind of different ways that if you just have an hour, even if you just have half an hour, I would recommend at least half an hour, if not an hour of your time, talking about gender up front, because these are going to be issues that people begin to talk about on the sidelines as well. So here's a few different activity ideas. You could do what's called a fishbowl dialogue, which I've seen work really well at certain trainings that I've done. And this is, hey, sorry, I'm on. Oh, okay. So there's the fishbowl dialogue, which you could do, which is basically where you take a group of maybe 4 people, and you you take a group of 4 people, you have them sit in an inner circle, and then everybody else together is on the outer circle, so they're kind of observing it as a fishbowl. And this creates an intimacy and a genuine dialogue between the 4 people who are talking. And it gives the opportunity of everybody else to observe. And so you could do this with all women, but I would recommend doing it with two women, 2 men, some local, some non-local, and then teasing out a couple of these questions that I outline at the bottom. You know, what has your experience been as a male or female in your context? What do you appreciate about the way your culture views gender, and how do you wish to see it change, if at all? Maybe they don't. And how would you wish to see the other gender support you in that change, if any? So these are questions to begin generating discussion and again, begin to understand, allow time for those more deeper things to percolate. So there's a fishbowl dialogue you could do. You could do a regular panel discussion, but chances are you're doing a lot of panels throughout IDDS, so it's not quite as intimate as maybe a fishbowl dialogue might be. Fishbowl dialogue does have drawbacks if people aren't comfortable with people watching them. It might not be the best activity. A panel might be more comfortable. And also a panel opens it up if other people have questions. You could do a role play. This is a fun way to engage, but sometimes it's hard to reach depth with a role play. On the other hand, sometimes a role play could help women experience what it's like to be a man and men to experience what it's like to be a woman, so you could get creative in there. It's not my personal favorite, but for some people it works really well. And then, again, just having small group discussions with any of these. Small group discussions are going to happen on their own. But again, teasing out some of those questions. So I do recommend a gender session, and I also recommend at some point when we talk about culture, talking about this, and I'll talk about it at you'll hear me talk about it at organizer orientation. If I'm there, I'll probably be there for all of your summits during the health and safety session, and I will briefly mention this, but I would love for everybody to talk about this at the end of your summit. And here's why. So has anybody seen this cultural adjustment cycle? Deborah and I think Deborah may have remembered it looking a little bit different from when I shared it last year. Do you remember me talking about this last year at all, Deborah?
No.
No.
I'm trying to read. It's very small.
Yeah, it's very small. So this is a better diagram than what I shared last year. So I'm going to be sharing this one a lot. It's called the cultural adjustment cycle. It's also what they call a W curve. But basically, this just shows and demonstrates that there is a wave of cultural adjustment that you'll go through as an organizer, as a participant, whether you're from that host country or not. IDDS is its own context. So emotionally, what's happening is you start out at this, level playing field, coming from your home, and then coming to IDDS. You hit point 1, everything's new and interesting. Then you start being like, oh, where do I get water from? When is the food here? What's the next schedule? Maybe things begin to get stressful. You don't get along with your roommate, or something becomes challenging. Your project is really difficult. So you end up dipping down to number 3. You might feel homesick. You might kind of miss the things that are away from your home. And again, not just your home country, but even just being with your family. If I'm a Ugandan coming to IDDS Cook Stoves, I might be from Kampala, but I'm spending 2 full weeks with a group of people that I do not know. And this might just be something where I begin to, miss my kid at home, or I miss my husband, and that's okay. But just being aware that people are going through this emotional cycle. But then, something happens. You learn to adapt. You develop different strategies. Maybe your coping mechanism is going on walks or journaling, or even just talking to your roommate, talking to your facilitators and organizers or each other. And then, you start getting shared memories with your IDDS group. Talent show comes along, and you're like, this is amazing. You start feeling good, and right at the moment that you begin to feel good, you go back home where you're feeling high because you're like, I can finally sleep after IDDS. This is amazing. But then what we do see at IDDS is, people miss morning circle now, and they miss hanging out with each other, and they miss that person that they met at that one person's house that they're probably never going to see again. And there's a bit of almost a depression that begins to happen, saying, how am I going to see these people again? Or where is that community that I developed? But then again, you learn your coping strategies. You're like, okay, I can talk to them, via Skype or WhatsApp, and you learn that there are other ways of this is a part of life, and then you begin to develop your new sense of normal. So this is an emotional cycle. Some people go through multiple dips during IDDS. Some don't really experience a dramatic dip. Maybe it's just a light, and some it's very dramatic. It's going to be different for different people, but in general, everybody experiences this to one way or another, and you will as well. And I'm sure you can attest that in your different travels and different phases of life, you have experienced this. And this is to be aware that this is what we're going through all together. And if we're aware of that, we can at least talk to each other about it and not be afraid. Or if we do begin to feel sick or weary, maybe taking a step back and say, oh, this might be because I'm adjusting to a new culture. My brain is processing a lot right now, and that's okay. Take a moment away and come back. So I'd like for participants and organizers to be aware that it's okay, that it happens, that you're there for each other. And then also being aware, again, that it's going to happen when you go back home, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's almost 100 out of 100 in different ways, but everybody experiences this to some extent.
I feel like that's what happened my first year away at college.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a new culture, right? Like I'm in college life and working and living on my own. Yeah. So I think we all know this, and it's just a good visual to have in front of our face and be like, okay, this does happen. It's normal. It's okay. Because I think when we just hide it or forget about it, then it's easy to just derail a bit. So again, here are some past cultural sessions that I've seen at other IDDSs that work well. A lot of our sessions have traditionally been more focused on the 10% observable things, the food, the music, the dancing. And IDDS Zambia, Henry worked for Peace Corps. He did an awesome job. I'll link the PowerPoint that he had to here. Feel free to use that as a template for activities. He did a great job teaching the language. He does this professionally, so it's something he's really good at. And so they did a great job with that. IDDS Columbia, IDDS Zero Waste last year, they had a university come and they really engaged the Colombian participants to teach internationals and with each other. They went through a few different games, again covering more of the 10%. They showed some video and song and dance. It was very multimedia. It was super fun. But then once we start getting to the more deeper things, there's only a few things that we've really done recently that are kind of cool. There's a cultural Jeopardy game I have that I'll link to here that you can play. And the instructions are on there for any of you who have played Jeopardy. It's just basically like a fun trivia game where you get to pick the topic, ask a question. You have teams versus teams. It's a fun game, a fun way to tease out those deeper questions if you only have like an hour. And we do it in our working styles worksheet. We do talk about some of these topics already a little bit, and you guys are well familiar with that. But then we also every summit has an empathy session as well, and IDDS Lahore actually had an empathy night here. And here you see Max lighting a lantern and lifting it up. Again, I'll link the materials to what they had. They actually have a script available that you can read through, and they decided they wanted it to be a little bit more intimate, so they saved it until the night. They had it on the rooftop of their building. It was very calm. They had candles lit, and they made it a really important, somber moment. And that was something that worked really well for their summit. For your summit, it might be something different. So these are just some ideas. Feel free to pull from or adapt as you see fit. And then other resources that I do want you to be aware are available. Peace Corps Culture Matters manual is like standard across the board in every organization. We have tons of hands-on activities. All the activities that I just went through with you pretty much come from there. So feel free to pull from those. There's the Hofstede Center, and they actually map out those 5 dynamics of culture that I mentioned at the beginning. They do that per country. There's only a couple of our summit countries that are on there, but you can, if you want to do more research and methodology, you can dig into there as much as you want. And then the Oxfam Gender and Training Manual. So if you need some more ideas on what are gender activities we can run beyond what I've mentioned, this is an amazing 500-page manual of just activity after activity after activity, and they're all hands-on interactive. These have been done all over the globe in developing countries, developed countries both. Pull from them. It's free. And then YouTube. It's awesome, like just showing videos, showing music, song, integrating dance within there, but also showing different situations and having people respond to them are good ways to generate dialogue too. So utilize your resources around you. Anything else that you guys want to add that you've seen work well, or other resources that you recommend?
No, but I was thinking about having some, making some videos in the community
Yeah,
and sharing with the participants,
that's
so
awesome.
they know a little bit about them beforehand. But it's just an idea. I didn't, yeah.
I think
I
that's an
think.
awesome idea.
Mhm.
I think with anything, you know, a recommendation that I have made to all groups very early on that I haven't really reiterated as much as I could is use your blogs and start sharing all the cultural information you can. I would love for our participants to be aware of what languages are spoken, and Duolingo is awesome. Other language applications out there that people can start learning languages if they want. They can at least know about the geography. I love that idea, Deborah, of even just taking a few videos of the community and sharing it with people is amazing. One thing to be mindful of is just be aware that some participants take stock of your participants and know who has access to the internet or access to high-speed internet and who doesn't. I encourage you continue to share, but just think through what are the ways that you can still share that information with people who might not have access. And so maybe the people who don't have access already know this information. You know, maybe there are people who are already from the community and aware of it, so it doesn't really matter. But just be aware of that and think through how can I also share the information with them. So yeah, I love that idea, Deborah. It's great. Anything else?
No, I would take a look at these links that you send.
Cool. Any other questions you guys have about any of this?
I don't know, it's not a question, but something that is happening when I'm in the community is that I've been talking more and more with women.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I notice is one, there is there's one case of a woman that was walking in the street, but
Yeah.
and the man tried to rape her.
Wow.
And also another thing that happened was the women, they cannot, the men are not allowing women to buy the laundry machine because they are getting lazy if they do not do the laundry with their hands. So I have my nephew and niece, sorry.
No.
So that's something that is happening. Like what the woman, there is one woman that has to buy all the things from the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Because the men are not allowing them to buy makeup or dresses, so they are pretending that it's just a gift. So there is a huge sexism in the community that is really, we cannot see in the deep level that you said, in the ocean.
Yeah. And I think it's good that you're aware of that too, Deborah, because and just recognizing the fact that there are certain things that we will not be able to change in the course of an IDDS, but taking stock of it and seeing how can we work within the current system in a way that would eventually produce change. and just being honest about what we observe or what people are telling us. And
yeah, and it's not an information that I would share with the participants. I would be very careful because I don't think it's so hidden
yeah,
that I think it's not something that I should bring this up because participants are going. But I don't know how to make them aware about it. You know, how can I tell them that maybe a woman it's not treated as a man, as not as a man, but as the man is treated. I don't know, but we know how happens in many other DDS. So
yeah. And I think that's a great point. Like, how and when is it appropriate to share observations that we've had that might not be viewed as positive? Obviously, if it's something that jeopardizes someone's safety, we should say something. We should make people aware. But I think your intuition to not say anything yet is appropriate. And here's the main reason why I think that is because I think as participants are living in the community and they begin observing, these are things that they'll notice anyhow. It may be certain things that you've been involved so long that you're seeing things that would take them too long to see. And I think that would just have to be up to your discretion to think, do you think this is relevant information for them to know for their project and what they're doing? And how sure are you of this? And how applicable is it? But I think that's a wise move to err on the side of caution and just to hold on to that information for now and see if other people are making the same observations. Yeah, that's a good point, Deborah. Anything else? I think we're coming up on the closing of our time.
no.
Okay. All right, well, I will share this presentation with you guys. And as you saw, I mean, we started a little bit late because we had some Google Hangout hiccups. But this session that I just did with you took about an hour. So even if you just wanted to run through something like this with your participants, just as a conversation starter, there's no way, just like business, just like design, there's no way we could cover all of culture in an hour. We could have a whole summit just on culture. But if we can make sure that there is time, real estate in the schedule dedicated to just acknowledging what this is and how it affects the rest of our summit, I think that will be a really valuable input into what you're doing. And there'll obviously be conversations that begin to happen on the sidelines, as they're at their homestays or while they're getting tea and coffee or having dinner. Different people will continue to have these conversations, but at least they'll know they're not alone. They'll have this framework that they're aware of. Most people are aware of culture. They know what it is. They've seen, especially if they are coming from a more educated background, they've seen iceberg, they've seen some of these things. But again, just getting people to be aware of that and challenging their assumptions, and challenging, what I observe, is this just that person? Is it that group of people? Is it the entire country? And just taking a step back and being aware of that. So our goal is understanding. So hopefully this was fun for you guys. I love running it with people. I'm happy if you guys want to work together. I'll be at the beginning of all the summits. So if this is something that you decide to put in your first 2 or 3 days, I'm happy to stay extra and help you run this session. But some of you, I think, are very qualified already to run this on your own. And I hope that these have been some helpful tools to think it.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. Looking forward to being in.
All right. Have a great week. Next week, I hope we'll be talking about skill builders. I'll keep you guys posted via email. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Thanks for joining.
Bye.